Okay, everybody. So Tim back with Softcore Gamer Girl, which someday I'll figure out where that name came from, but not today. Uh, the Blueberry's back, by the way. Blueberry decided to make an appearance again tonight because it was feeding night. I figured, what the hell, the spider can come back. The debate that just won't go away is the combat wheelchair debate in Dungeons and Dragons. And for the life of me, I don't get it, right? Because I've been called everything from a fascist to a communist to a bunch of words I had to go Google and look up to figure out what it was people were calling me over this whole thing. And for the life of me, I don't understand. Because I've been playing since 1980 something. And I've never once encountered a group that was like, you can't do that. It's just, I've never seen it. So I'm bringing people in to talk about it. And she had some comments on Twitter that I thought were interesting. So I thought I'd let you take it away and kind of give your opinion on this whole thing and tell people
and
about
of
your
course,
Twitch.
and of course, here comes the goblin. Um,
Who's the goblin?
You're the goblin.
The goblin? Wait, can you put this together?
Can I put it together in about 20 minutes?
No.
Why not?
Oh.
Here, let me see.
I did it.
Yeah, he is together. There you go. You did it yourself.
There you go. This is the wonderful world of Dungeons and Dragons.
You're not the goblin? Okay. Okay, where were we? Sorry about that.
Tell people about your Twitch and then what it is, your thoughts on the combat wheelchair in Dungeons and Dragons.
Well, and I think like part of it mostly stems from that there's more than just one argument going on. So I think like there's the argument of a combat wheelchair or wheelchair in Dungeons and Dragons, and most people are just like, oh well, I would come up with something cooler and then have like other cooler options or something that would work in their campaign versus like actual wheelchair, and that kind of stuff. I'm all here for, because that like grows more lore, more stories, more like creativity, just coming up with different ways. And same with any of the arguments that people have, because I mean everybody's going to argue about everything, about why there would be, say, disabled people in a fantasy world, and like why doesn't the magic work and that kind of stuff, because that just all builds on creativity, that kind of stuff. My biggest problems stem from when that argument becomes less about the practicality of it and how it works in their on their table, and that kind of thing, and more about the fact that it even exists is like an affront to their very like everybody's like way that they play D&D. Like the fact that this wheelchair has been displayed is, I don't know, it's causing people to melt down, and I don't understand, because it's like, if you don't like it, don't use it. I mean, so, and that's like the same argument we have for a lot of things.
In Dragonlance, the gnomes have built gnome flingers. They have built rockets that have taken us to the Red Moon. In one of the Dragonlance books, I think the gnomes built a nuclear weapon. It was kind of just sort of hinted at. So that's all okay, right? But somehow a wheelchair is a step too far. It was like, well, it's not original lore. We can't have it because blah, blah, blah. So this is, a 1980 version of a module that I had when I was a kid, Expedition of the Barrier Peaks. Everybody can see right there. Gary Gygax wrote it. There's freaking laser weapons, right? So that's okay. Wheelchair is a step too far, right? We can't possibly have that. And I even had one person that tell me like, oh, well, if you don't include it, they'll send the Pinkertons out to your house. I'm like, come on, really?
Yeah, nobody's going to do that. Like, yeah, like I said, I probably myself would never use one, like as for a character build. If somebody, like if I was DMing and somebody wanted to use one in a campaign, absolutely, I would, try to find a way to make that work for them, because that's what they want their character to be. Like, and then the people get mad that it's like, well, if it's all just for flavor and doesn't actually change the nature of the game or whatever, then why are you even doing it?
Why do we do anything?
Why not? Why have different kinds of swords that all do slashing damage? Why have
a +5 dagger that
like
happens to a +5 dagger that glows when it's near somebody chaotic, right? I mean, come on, there's weird stuff all over the game. There is a flying carpet that is a perfectly acceptable lore inside Forgotten Realms wiki. There is a carpet of flying, right? It's
Mhm.
out there. People and nobody questions it, but a combat wheelchair, everybody like is all up in and I don't get it because nobody's forcing people to use it. That's the part I don't get. Yet there have been disabled or at least partially disabled characters in games because like if you take the original Dragonlance, there was a mage who needed his brother or a staff, or he wasn't walking upstairs half the time, right?
Yeah.
And everybody loved that guy. There are other spots where I've been a player for since I was 10, and there were times when my dad used to be the dungeon master, and he was getting annoyed at me one night, so he had this one character who I was playing in a weird way. He's like, "Okay, you just lost an arm in combat," so, and he came up with like these weird ways to get that character out of the game. But had I been thinking as a kid, I would have said, "Well, okay, now I have a wheelchair, right?" As my dad chops off my leg. So, DMs do sometimes do that, and you're left with a choice of retire a character or come up with a creative answer. And it's kind of a creative answer in some cases, right? I mean,
Yeah, like it just adds like, yeah, exactly. If you wanted to have a character that for some reason, got cursed or lost the use of their lower legs, here's an option for them to then use, even if it's just for a little while.
yeah, like, oh, I
What I
broke my
find
leg.
really funny, one part I found really funny is I simultaneously, almost in like the same stream as I'm going down Twitter, is that wheelchairs aren't cool because simultaneously realism and not realism. So there's those that are saying you can't have it because Dungeons and Dragons fantasy setting is based on whatever it is, 13th century, blah, blah, blah kind of thing. And they didn't have wheelchairs. And then there's other people who are like, you can't have wheelchairs because I don't want that level of realism in my fantasy world.
I saw that one too. It's like somebody came up with me, well, wheelchairs weren't just an event until like 16, whatever. Like, okay, but we're talking about a game with flying lizards that breathe fire, right? And that's okay. But well, wait, wheelchairs weren't around until the 1600s, so we can't possibly have it because Dungeons and Dragons is apparently a documentary now. It's not, it's a fantasy world. It's a make-up game. You kind of just have fun with it. And as a dungeon master, some of the most fun I've ever had as a DM, which by the way is not necessarily the most fun thing in the world to do if you're used to being a player. Sometimes being a DM is just a lot of work. I don't mind doing it, but it's a lot of work, especially if you have a rules lawyer who's one of the players, right? And then you're like, oh, okay, fine. But some of the most fun I've had as a DM was with players I've known for years who looked at each other like, okay, let's try something weird to see if we can screw Tim up, right? So they'd come up with some bizarre thing that they were going to go try to do, just to see if it would mess up the adventure. And somehow we always work through it. And I don't think a wheelchair is that crazy. Yeah, okay, there's issues with stairs, but my dad was in a wheelchair for 15 years, and it was a problem, but it wasn't ever an insurmountable one. And yeah, okay, problems with dirt. Well, okay, but we also have horse-covered wagons, and there are ways to handle that problem as well. And I was talking to somebody this morning who actually is in a wheelchair and about this problem, and he brought up an interesting point. Was let's say you're fighting a blue dragon, and okay, we have a combat wheelchair, and that combat wheelchair happens to have insulated tires of some kind, even though we'll let that part go for a second because wood doesn't really conduct electricity. But let's say you're fighting a blue dragon and a lightning bolt attack happens. He's insulated. He takes no damage, right? Because electricity doesn't flow through non-conducting stuff, and he's not hitting the ground. So,
Yeah,
um,
like it can be, better or worse. Like you have and like you do with anything, you try to make things balanced. So, there might be some encumbrances with being in a wheelchair, or you get some bonuses for being in a wheelchair.
light armor from bizarre directions, right? I mean, it kind of
Your
adds
upper
adds
body strength is fantastic.
absolutely right because that's something else. Like the guy who I was talking to who is in a wheelchair, he's like, people don't realize just how strong people in wheelchairs really are in the upper body. It's incredible. And I started thinking about it. I'm like, that's actually a reasonably good point because
Well,
I would
and it
not
was
want to arm
funny
wrestle one of those guys.
because like I actually talked to a friend of mine. She has a wheelchair, but she mostly uses her crutches because she can. And she only owns the wheelchair because she wanted to play basketball. She's shied at it, so she doesn't really play, but she likes watching. And like if you ever watch like any of the wheelchair sports, really, like the amount they can move, pivot, turn, like people saying
It,
it's encumbers them that way is like clearly you've never been with somebody who has spent their whole life training with it.
my dad was in one for 20 years and he didn't wind up in it until he was in his late 50s. Maybe it wasn't 20, maybe about 15, but even in his 60s, like his upper body strength went way up because he was so used to pushing himself around. He had been for 5 years at that point.
Yeah.
So he and I were kind of evenly matched in an arm wrestling match too. I'm not going anywhere near the old man because, he might be in his 60s, but watch out, right? So yeah, you're exactly right. It actually offers some bonuses in a lot of ways. It does have some encumbrances, but so did the mage in the first three Dragonlance books, right? He slowed him down enormously,
Well,
and nobody cared.
yeah, and I'd like the arguments about, oh, like they're just going to screw up the campaign and like nobody wants to play with somebody that they're going to have to help do this or do that. But it's like, but all the characters have always had like different bonuses and such. Nobody's yelling that gnomes have a 10-foot less walking speed than everybody else. Like you all just wait for the gnome. Or
One of the arguments I absolutely adored this afternoon was great. So everybody else can go up the stairs in 1 minute, but it takes you 8. Who keeps track of time that carefully in their campaign? Ever. I've been playing for 40 years. I've never seen anybody keep track of time that minusculely carefully throughout a game. Maybe in the middle of a combat sequence and somebody needs to get up faster. Maybe. But that's nobody's like, well, as we're exploring the castle, you slow us. Gives a shit, right? It's fine. It's not that big of a deal. So anyway, I look at it like this is sort of a non-debate, and somebody brought up to me earlier, and I won't say who, but somebody was like, well, maybe it's Hasbro trying to get us all to talk about this again and fight it. Maybe it's actually Hasbro driven. I don't know if it is or not, but it Hasbro has enough problems. I don't think they need us turning on each other at the same time. But the one thing
yeah,
I've been trying to tell people since the beginning, and I'd love to hear your thoughts on it, is I've been playing since '82, right? It's 40, a lot of years. So we're not going to do the math. But it to me, it's always been a game where you had like this nice island of misfit toys. You had people who didn't fit in other places. Because I'm a physicist, people don't really sit around and talk to physicists on a regular basis. Right. And when I was a teenager, I was always the nerdy kid. I was sort of the guy that nobody hung out with. But Dungeons and Dragons was a place for you to kind of have that sense of community that you don't get other places. So you get these people who just don't fit in the normal, oh, I'm the jock, I'm the this, I'm the that. You get the people who are kind of, okay, we're kind of the people who just don't belong in any real category, right? But we've always come together and we've always found a way to play and never really make anybody the outcast. And I don't see why this one should be any different. You've been playing for probably not as long as me because you're obviously younger than I am. You're not supposed to ask women their age. And I'm not going to do it.
we
But
won't do the math on that either.
We're not doing the math on that one.
Don't do the math.
The point is, have you ever been at a table where somebody was like, "Oh, you can't do that"? It has been excluded for some reason. I've never seen it.
I've actually never been at a table where somebody was like, I've banned this, or I don't want to do this, or not a single one. And it's crazy to me. And like I get it as far as like go out into the world and I'm sure you'll find some people that don't want certain things, but I've never played at a table where anything I brought forward or somebody else has brought forward has been like, nope, we're not doing that.
I've never seen it either. So shall I leave it at that? At some point, we're going to get you down to the United States because you're in Canada, down to one of the conferences, Gen Con, Gary Con, or something.
Oh
But
man,
I know
with
with your kids, I know with all your kids, it would be a problem. I have the same issue. Yeah, I'm going to make it to one of these conferences one of these years. But anyway, let's just leave it with that so you can go take care of your kids. I'll load this up online, and if you send me a link to your Twitch account, I will put it in the comments for everybody. Okay.
Lucas. Stop.
Now can we play Possum?
Soon. Okay, I just have to finish up, okay? Okay. I couldn't hear any of that last bit.
So if you send me a link to your Twitch account, I will put it in the comments.
No, it's a spider.
And it's a spider. It's a giant tarantula. He eats crickets. He rips their heads off and eats crickets.
That's exciting.
Why they called cricket?
Crickets, they're a type of bug.
But is that a spider?
Yeah, it's a spider.
But why is he not looking at me?
Oh, because it's just a picture of the spider. He does have the spider.
But he has a spider web.
He does have spider web.
Nighttime.
Oh no, that spider is poisonous. You don't want to pick that one up.
Yeah.
And he's about that big, so you really don't want to pick that one up.
Yeah, I'm just trying to think if there's any major points. Well, and like I guess the crux of the matter is that like what makes me so mad about it. Like normally I'm very good about the whole everybody can play whatever they want at their table and I'm not going to worry too much about it. And let a lot of the arguments go is that they don't matter, right? Like nobody cares if you tell me that all the drow in your world are evil or not evil. I'm going to go hide somewhere. Hang on.
Wonderful night streaming from Canada. This is what happens when you do these things with kids in the house. I've got 3 of them. I understand this.
Everybody knows this in real life. Hiding from the children in the bathroom.
If you've got kids, that's what you do, right? And you just hope they don't figure out how to unlock it, because mine sometimes have figured that out.
Yeah. And the only reason I'm doing that is because I just want to finish getting my point across. Was that like none of the other arguments really matter as much? Like, yeah, if you want to tell me all the drow are evil, I'm like, I'm not concerned about the drow of the world being upset about that. Or, you know, like I said before, maybe somebody doesn't want to have gnomes in their campaign. Okay, well, like, let's forget about the gnomes. But like when you're talking about people in wheelchairs and saying, or like having any disability, really, they can't be heroes. They can't do this. They can't do that. Or any of those kind of arguments. It's like, there are real people who spend like their actual lives being told they can't do something. So if they want to try and act out like what it is in a fantasy world that can make those kind of possibilities like endless, why are you grading it that way?
No, I get it.
This is gonna go so well. I had so many good points.
No, that's quite all right. So we could do this. We could post this one and see what people say. I'm sure there'll be comments, because there always are. And we could do a part 2 as a follow-up to this if you'd like. But I'll put this one up. Please send me the link to your Twitch account, and I will put it in the comments. Put it in the description, and I'll throw it up. And please comment away and click like and subscribe or dislike. And I'm quite sure when people disagree with me, everybody posts that anyway. I don't need to tell you that. They will appear. I had one of these we did the other day that was about the same topic. I think I had 168 comments in the first 24 hours, and I'm pretty sure only 2 of those agreed with me. So it to me, I think this is just that topic that just sort of never dies. But I don't get why people are so against it. So I think you agree with me, but we'll leave it at that. And just send me a link to your Twitch account. I'll throw it up there.
Okay, perfect.
Have a great night.